When my mom and dad retired, they got themselves a house in Greece, leaving me to care for the family home on my own. I didn't mind. It was better than trying to buy something on my own. Still, a 2-story home for a single man in his early 30s? That's a bit much. I lost my job during the pandemic, and with prices on the rise, I decided to start renting out parts of the space I wasn't using. There was enough room upstairs to house at least a couple of college students, and a spacious basement for another. Just this large one-room basement that basically covered the entire underside of the building, supported by these thick concrete beams. It wasn't the kind of place I'd usually consider renting out, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to offer, as long as I was honest about the state of things. I spent a good month just preparing the spaces, clearing out the upstairs and moving things from the basement to a long-term storage facility. At first it looked like we had some water damage to deal with, but it turned out to be a false alarm. All in all, it was shaping up to be a pretty painless transition, and the rent would keep me afloat until I could get a proper job. I put out an ad on a couple of socials, one for the upstairs space, large enough to support at least a couple of people, and then the basement. I wasn't really sure about the basement, but I included a few pictures and hoped for the best. The price was cheap too. Cheaper than it should be, I guess. I got a few applications for the upstairs space, but most of them were either really short-term or started arguing about the price. One guy just showed up and tried to walk straight in without calling first. It was a weird time. I didn't get any calls about the basement though, so I figured I just screwed that up. It was early October when I had a knock at the door. The classic da-da-da-da-da kind of knock. I hurried to open, still browsing job openings on my phone and chewing on a piece of cold pizza from the prior night. It's hard to explain how surprised I was to see what I saw. Most other applicants had been either young guys or college girls. What was now standing in front of me was a family of 4. A mother and father, both in their mid-40s, and 2 young boys ranging from 10 to 14 years old. The mom had this autumn-colored cotton dress with a little ribbon, and the dad had this fancy black overcoat, a white shirt with a red tie. Both kids were dressed up in identical blue shirts. At first, I thought they were there to try and convert me to something. I could easily imagine them with a set of Bibles. Instead, the dad stepped forward, offering me a handshake. I accepted.
Hi there.
He said with a warm smile.
We're the Walters. We're here about the ad.
Oh, hello, I answered. It might get a bit crowded, but you're free to have a look. Sorry about the, I vaguely gestured to my unprepared state, but the dad just shook his head.
Not at all. Hope we're not imposing.
I invited them inside and they went right past the stairs. I figured they just missed it. Excuse me, I said. It's right up here.
Oh, we know.
Smiled the mom.
We're here about the basement.
So there's this long wooden staircase that spirals into the basement. It's one of the main reasons I don't like going down there or furnishing the place. That spiral makes it almost impossible to bring down any proper furniture. It's infuriating. But all 4 members of this picture-perfect family stepped down, all composed. They were courteous and respectful, with just the polite amount of excitement. But I got the sense that there was something just off about them. The dad brought out some measuring tape and started checking the walls. They asked me about the lack of windows, the air quality, their ability to bring down some furniture and put up some light fixtures. I agreed to all of it. I still couldn't believe they were actually considering it. This was clearly not a space meant for a family of 4, and they gave the impression that they were pretty well off. There was no reason for them to rent a space like this. Still, as they finished their inquiries, the mother approached me.
Would you mind stepping upstairs and just walking around a bit?
She asked.
We'd like to see how much sound carries through.
A strange way to ask for soundproofing, but I did as she asked. I got up the stairs, put on my heaviest boots, and just wandered around for a bit. After a couple of minutes, I turned the corner only to see all 4 of them standing in the hallway. Picture perfect as always, all with a big smile on their faces.
We're very pleased,
the mother said.
We'll take it.
They signed a 6-month rent agreement, and I got to know them a little better over the next few weeks as they sporadically dropped by. There was Layla, the mother, Anders, the father. The kids were 8 and 12, and Albin, 13. Apparently, they were in between housing and wanted something small and cheap in the interim. Despite all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that a basement was a strange choice for them. Still, I needed the money, and they were eager to get it done. They even offered to pay a little extra since they were bringing in more people than I'd anticipated. About a week later, they showed up for the official move-in. Layla and Anders insisted on bringing in everything in themselves, and that I shouldn't be bothered with any heavy lifting. Apparently, just letting them stay there was favor enough. They brought in about a dozen pieces of furniture covered in blue tarp in various sizes, along with a dozen or so large cardboard boxes. None of them marked. They put down several hand-woven carpets, the kind you'd see in a large mansion. Layla was a stay-at-home mom, while Anders worked as some kind of security manager for a nearby airport. He worked odd hours, anything from 12-hour shifts to all-nighters and everything in between. He was also on call for most hours of the day and sometimes had to leave with short notice. It was strange, though. One might think a person like that would need space with good cell coverage. But that basement barely had a single bar. There was Wi-Fi, but it was spotty at best. For some reason, none of this seemed to bother them. That first week living with the Walters was not a problem. Most of the time, I forgot they were even there. I only saw them leave the basement a handful of times, and they didn't make any noise. At most, I could hear them stomping up or down that creaky old staircase a couple of times. But that was mostly Anders heading to work. In fact, I never saw Aiden and Albert leave for school. I figured they were being homeschooled, further pushing the idea that this family might have some kind of religious background. Still, they were hardly an issue. I was still working hard on finding someone to rent the upstairs, but I was having no luck. I'd considered lowering the price, but after the Walters moved in, money was becoming less of an issue. Anders even suggested that I apply for a job at the airport. He knew one of the HR people looking for hires in various departments. Having been jobless for 5 months, I was willing to try pretty much anything. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling me the whole story. I kept coming back to one thought: what the hell they were even doing down there? Once, I decided to get a better look at what they'd done with the place. At that point, I hadn't even seen how they decorated it. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and I had no idea whether they were even down there or not. Their car was gone from the driveway. I knocked a couple of times, and when there was no response, I used my key to get down. As I turned the corner, it was deathly quiet and completely dark. I turned on the lights. They all slept in these basic single beds, all spaced out along the easternmost wall. They had a small love-seat couch, along with a couple of basic plastic chairs, facing a thick old TV placed against the wall. There was an empty bookshelf and a couple of scattered carpets along the floor. I could see a few open boxes. There was a bathroom next to the staircase, but it looked unused. No toothbrushes or anything. It took me a few moments to realize that I wasn't alone. The entire family was standing in a line along the southernmost wall, furthest away from the staircase. They were standing in order of size from tallest to smallest, remaining perfectly still, just looking at me. It wasn't until they noticed me seeing them that they reacted. They all looked up at me, putting on a friendly smile.
Can we help you?
Asked Layla.
I hope we didn't make too much noise,
continued Anders. The kids just nodded in unison. I took a good look at them, but I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. I had no explanation for their behavior. Sorry, I was just gonna check the water pressure, I lied. I tried knocking.
That's all right.
Smiled Anders.
Go right ahead.
Walking back up the stairs, a thought hit me. If they were all down there, why was their car gone? Who'd taken it? I had a number of strange interactions with them over the next couple of weeks. For example, I once found Aiden, the younger of the two brothers, standing in the kitchen. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just standing there, staring at the spice rack. When I asked him about it, he just said he wasn't doing anything. After a while, he turned on his heel and ran back downstairs. I didn't see it, but I heard his little feet thump all the way down the staircase. Another time, I saw Layla standing in the open doorway, leading to the basement. She was just standing there, hand on the doorknob, looking right at me. I said, "Hello," and she said it right back, but she wouldn't let me out of her sight. When I finally passed from her view, I could hear her running back downstairs. Not just hurrying, running. Another time I saw Anders in the car out on the driveway. I saw him from the upstairs window, just sitting there, hands on the steering wheel, for a good 15 minutes. No radio or nothing, just him alone in his car. But the strangest interaction came one night when I was going to the kitchen to get a Coke. I spotted Layla standing in the kitchen, fridge wide open. I could see her silhouette illuminated by the fridge bowl. Her long black hair, wet from a fresh shower. Standing in a hastily tied bathrobe, her feet bare. At first I didn't see anything strange. She was just standing there. She wasn't getting anything. It was more like she was bathing in the light. I thought about calling out to her, but something about her demeanor made me want to sneak back into my bedroom. Then I saw it. There was something wrong with her ear. Her left ear was about 3 inches higher up than her right one, without her bending her neck. Her scalp seemed lightly tilted, and there was something about the way she moved her fingers that didn't look natural. They pointed in different directions, like her hand was ever so slightly fractured. I just stayed there for a while, looking at her from a distance, watching her shoulders rise and fall as she took deep breaths, inhaling the cold. When she turned my way, I only saw her for a moment, her torso moving first, and her legs following, like a stilted claymation puppet. I managed to slip around the corner and heard her rush back towards the basement, her feet tapping against the hallway carpet in an uneven rhythm. When she got to the door, she stopped. I was leaning against the wall, listening from the other room. I heard her step around for a bit. Then there was a snap, a popping limb, something finding its way back into a socket. Her steps resumed a natural pattern as she hurried downstairs. I just stayed there for a while, trying to keep calm. For all intents and purposes, I might have just been seeing her in a weird light. It was dark and I was sleepy. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnatural about her. That I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. From that day forward, I got more suspicious. I didn't go into the hallway at night, and I did my best to avoid the basement door altogether. I tried my best to just put them out of my head. I went back to focus on getting a job and a second tenant for the upstairs space, both of which proved to be a challenge. But I was making progress. The TSA was hiring, for example. Not the most glamorous job, but it'd be solid work. There was a couple of college students who came by to check the upstairs floor, a young couple who needed a place to stay while they finished up their master's degrees. They seemed like solid people, and we got along just fine. They knew the place wasn't the most glamorous, but it was a neat short-term solution while they finished up the upcoming semester. The only problem was the Walters family, who I had yet to introduce them to. I remember knocking on the basement door, having the young couple standing behind me expectantly. Albin, the oldest of the brothers, chimed in with a cheerful, "Come in." As we stepped downstairs, the family of four was standing in a picture-perfect 2x2 formation. Mom and Dad in the back, 2 kids in the front, all dressed in their Sunday best, with a freshly printed smile across their faces. The whole scene was so absurd, like some kind of misplaced commercial from the 1950s.
Hello.
Giggled Layla.
Aren't they the most handsome couple, Anders?
They sure are, Layla. What do you think, kids?
And in unison, without skipping a beat, the kids answered,
They sure are handsome.
For the next 20 seconds or so, this uncomfortable silence grew between us. The Walters just stood there, smiling at us, waiting for some kind of response. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't help but to feel that I was missing something obvious. Was Layla's eye color a bit different? Was Albin's face a bit lopsided? Was Ander's missing a finger? Or did he just stand in a weird angle? Maybe they'd been strange all along. Maybe it was only now that I was seeing it. When we finally parted ways, I followed the young couple outside. They both turned to me, their faces ashen. One of them just stuttered, but the other managed to form a few words.
We're not one to judge,
She said,
but those people give me the creeps.
"You won't be seeing much of them then."
Yeah, see, that's my point. Who does that? What kind of family willingly lives in a basement?
"It's only a temporary measure, I assure you. By then, the other chimed in.
What's with the boxes?
He asked.
What's in them?
"Personal keepsakes, clothes, that kind of stuff."
No, I mean, The box that moved. The blue one.
The discussion died down and they said their goodbyes. I got the feeling that they wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Still, their words lingered in the back of my head. A box that moved? Really? How'd I miss that? After countless sleepless nights, I decided to finally get some answers. I had to take a little risk and figure this out once and for all. So one day I slipped a note under the door, informing them that we needed them to clear out the basement for one afternoon while a plumber did some repairs. I looked up a few plumbing things on Wikipedia and referenced a real company, making it look all official and stuff. Later that day, Layla and Anders dropped by holding hands, telling me that they'd be sure to be out for the day.
Maybe we'll go to the zoo,
smiled Anders. Don't you have work? I asked.
It comes and goes.
He laughed.
We're very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Agreed Layla.
So very fortunate.
At the designated time, the family was out of the building. They went for a drive in Anders' car, promising to return shortly. I told them it wouldn't take the plumber more than an hour. They seemed a little suspicious when they hadn't seen the actual plumber show up yet, and they let that suspicion hang in the air. Finally, I just straight up lied, giving them a fake name and asking whether they wanted me to call him. Layla didn't call my bluff, luckily, but as they pulled out of the driveway, I could tell I was sweating. I didn't even know what I feared, but my mind kept returning to that night when I'd seen her standing in the light of the fridge. I had no idea what they were hiding or what they might do if I found out about it. But there was a part of me that just wanted to get into my car and drive, and another part of me telling me I was being silly. When they finally drove away, I wasted no time. I hurried downstairs, turned on the light, and started to go through their stuff. It was an invasion of privacy, probably illegal. But if I wanted to sleep soundly again, I had to have an idea about why they were being so goddamn weird. There were a lot of oddities about their space. For example, all their beds were perfectly made, like no one had slept in them. Most of the couches and surfaces were covered in dust. I could tell the TV hadn't been on in a long time. It wasn't even plugged in. There were no phones or phone chargers, no laptops or desktop computers, just a bunch of boxes and underutilized furniture. I did find a Polaroid camera, though, at least 30 years old. I started checking their boxes. Just clothes, it seemed. All variations of what I'd already seen. Identical sets of shirts, pants, dresses, and shoes. At least 4 boxes worth. One box was just full of accessories like earrings, necklaces, glasses, hairspray, and fake nails. Another was full of decorations and knickknacks. Porcelain dogs, family photos, dried sunflowers and roses, both with strange colors and fancy vases. I took my time, carefully placing everything back the way I found it. It was odd, but nothing incriminating or downright unnatural. Still, I remember what that couple had said about a box that moved. I couldn't see anything like it. That is, until I turned to leave. Right by the side of the stairs, resting next to the pristine bathroom, was a large blue styrofoam cooler. It was the kind of thing that kind of blended into the background, like it had always been there. Still, I could clearly remember not owning one of those things. It looked old and torn, like it had been around for years. And maybe I was imagining things, but it looked like it was moving, pulsing, pressing against the surface, making little plastic squeals. There was a sound coming from it, like a low guttural growl pushed through a thin pipe, a sharp, rhythmic noise. It made the cooler rattle and shake ever so slightly. I froze, hoping it would quiet down. I held my breath and waited for it to settle. I slowly stepped back up the stairs. As I rounded the corner and lost sight of the cooler, I heard the styrofoam cover pop off, and the sound became clearer. A loud growl, shifting in pitch from high to low, like a singer doing some kind of sick vocal warm-up, trying to find the right pitch. Then something hit the floor with a painful yelp. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to identify the sound. It was like a cross between a dog and some kind of fox, a sharp, screeching tone. Then it scrambled to its feet. I could hear claws and paws scratch the floor, and something was coming my way, fast. There was something primal in me that told me to run. I hurried up the stairs, only looking back for a short glimpse as I shut the door behind me. silent for a moment. Something black with a single eye reflecting back at me, its skin tight and misplaced across the skull. Teeth pointing in all directions, in seemingly random sizes. Black drool dripping off an elongated tongue. A thing wearing the cheap suit of a black dog. As I slammed the door shut, I could hear a car pull up on the driveway. It had been less than 30 minutes. Maybe they had planned to catch me in the act. I heard them come in and head straight for the basement. Meanwhile, I was in the other room, throwing together a small bag with a change of clothes and a toothbrush. The moment I heard the basement door shut, I headed for my car. The moment I got in the car, I saw them step out of the house. They all stood there in the driveway, just looking at me. And right next to them was a beautiful black Labrador, happily wagging its tail. I didn't say a word. I just drove. I had to get some space between us and figure out what the hell I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the police, but there was no way to explain what I'd seen. What could they even do? Kick them out for having a dog? There was even a clause in the rental agreement that allowed them a pet. I had nothing to go on. I decided to spend the night at a motel just outside of town. I needed time to think and sleep without having the threat of something strange living under my feet. I couldn't get that image out of my head. That black thing in a dog suit. Like something trying to remember what a dog looked and sounded like in real time. I checked in at the motel and got a room on the first floor. I crawled into bed, put the TV on, and surfed a bit on my phone. I could feel myself relax for the first time in weeks. But every time I thought about that house and that family, I could feel my pulse stagger. I had no idea what to do or who to call, which is what led me to this site in the first place. A lot of you seem to have seen strange things. I figured I'd post here eventually, but it took me quite some time to build up the courage, mostly because of what happened later that night. I remember a tap on the door. I must have dozed off. I hadn't turned the TV off or brushed my teeth. I just woke up with this sour feeling in my stomach, that something was terribly wrong. I had closed the curtains so I couldn't see who it was. I thought about hiding under the bed or locking myself in the bathroom. My thoughts raced, but I tried to temper them with rational what-ifs. Maybe it was just housekeeping or a concerned manager. Then the knock came again, this time with a voice.
Mister,
Said Alvin Walters.
your mom wants to talk to you.
I didn't answer. For a few seconds, I carefully stepped out of bed, trying my best not to make any noise.
Mom wants to talk to you.
He repeated.
It's urgent.
There was no way they didn't know I was in there. They knew, and they wanted something. And whatever it was, I didn't want to find out. I sneaked to the back of the room as the doorknob started to rattle. I could hear Alvin again. This time, his voice shrunk to threatening lows, like the dark growl of an adult or elderly man.
Mom wants to talk to you.
I pulled open the curtains to a window facing the back of the building. I figured I could climb out the window, but as soon as those curtains opened, my heart skipped a beat. Right there was Anders, the father himself, just inches from the window, standing straight with his neatly tucked shirt illuminated by the sharp light of the single TV screen. An ever-courteous smile cemented on his face. He tapped the window.
Would you mind opening up?
He asked.
It won't take long.
Again, I looked a little closer, and again I could see little details that were just off. A slight droop of the lip that hadn't been there the day before. One eye pulled lower than the other, his hairline further forward than usual, like he'd rushed himself to look like a person. Another knock at the door, another knock at the window. Voices from the front and the back. Hell, maybe even room next door. Little voices, big voices, broken voices.
We just want to clear some things up.
Mom wants to talk.
It's not what you think.
I had to make a break for it, but for that, I needed to decide where to go. So I pulled the front curtains aside to see how many of them were waiting up front. All 5 of them were standing out front. Mom, Dad, kids, and dog. I looked back, as if trying to convince myself I was sane. There were 2 dads, and none of them looked right. Further down the street in their car, I spotted 2 more kids identical to Aiden and Alvin, both with little quirks, like they weren't fully formed yet. A loose jaw, a strange eye, One of them had a wide bald spot. Stepping out of the motel manager's office, I saw another Layla, this one with a deflated arm and a paralyzed face. I was surrounded. I held up my phone like a weapon. "I'm calling the police," I yelled. "Get the fuck away from me,"
That'd be inconvenient,
said Anders.
And you'd be dead, added Abe.
Long dead.
Chuckled Alvin, his voice not tuned right. The doorknob rattled again, more forceful this time. I could feel my pulse rising, my breath growing short. I looked back and forth, seeing the Anders at the back window, trying to figure out the lock. Only now did I see that one of his fingers were nothing but bone.
How about a trade?
Suggested Layla.
Something for everyone.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Go inside that bathroom of yours, grab a piece of tissue and chew on it, then drop it out the window.
What? I couldn't understand what I was hearing. It's like the words were there, but didn't make any sense to me,
We're gonna need a new suit.
said Layla.
You will do.
You're not fucking wearing me.
Oh, we'll leave you alone. And you'll leave us alone. Because if you don't, people that look like you are gonna start doing some terrible things, aren't they, Anders?
Oh, they are, Layla.
Said an Anders.
Terrible, terrible things.
So that way, we can all walk away. You'll never see us again, and we'll leave you be.
I tried to wrap my head around it. They were gonna make suit out of me, like they'd done with that dog, and with that family. There would be someone looking like me, walking around out there. Something vile. But what choice did I have? I stepped into the bathroom and chewed up a piece of tissue. I spat it out and moved to the window. The family stepped back. I clicked the window open and flung the piece of tissue out with a flick of the finger. Layla picked it up and met my eyes with an unblinking gaze. With one clench of the fist, she grabbed the top of her head and pulled. Her entire face lurched backwards, her lower lip reaching all the way to her eyebrows. Underneath was just this black sludge, covering what looked like a deformed skull. She was like a walking oil slick, completely midnight black and slick as water. She pushed the piece of tissue inside herself before pulling her face back down. It took her a few seconds to realign, but she just couldn't get it to look right. She coughed a little. She waited. She nodded. And when she looked back at me, she did so with my own eyes, speaking with my own tongue. "Thank you," I heard myself say. "I think this will work out for all of us, don't you?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't think. I just closed the curtains and scrambled backwards. I heard a car pull around. I heard rustling in the bushes out back. And from afar, I could hear my own voice a final time. "We'll be gone by morning at Waptarenson," it said, "but we're never far away." A car drove off, leaving me in stunned silence, my mouth dry from hyperventilating. The next morning, they were gone. The basement was empty, and they even left a thank you note. Attached to it was a Polaroid picture of a happy family, a mom, a dad, 2 kids, and a funny uncle. One that looked exactly like me, and I have been contemplating on whether to share this for some time, knowing what they could do. But I believe they're not technically proficient enough to find this, and I've omitted a lot of details. I just need to know if anyone has met something similar, and if so, how you managed to put it behind you. Are they still out there? Are they watching me? How many suits do they have? I've wanted to just put this behind me and pretend it never happened, but it's getting harder and harder. Every now and then, I see someone that looks vaguely like them, an Anders with a different haircut, a Layla that's slightly younger. School photos with an Aiden or Alvin, but a different hair color. And a few weeks ago, I got a call from a friend mentioning how they'd seen me in the local newspaper. Only thing is, I've never been in it. I've considered moving somewhere far, far away. But first, I just need to get this out. I need someone to believe me. The real me, and not the me you might see in the papers. I've always had terrible stage fright. Growing up, one of my worst nightmares was to speak in front of the school. Hell, even speaking in front of my class was bad enough. Every talent show, or reading, or presentation was a sweat fest of insecurities. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Luckily, times change. I made it through college and got a job as a technical writer, mostly repair manuals. The company I work with need to update their products and documentation every 2 years as part of their government contract, and I'm pretty much the only one who knows enough to get the job done. It's technical, dull, and amazingly well paid. I've come a far way from that nervous kid I used to be. I'm a husband and a father of 3. I drive a station wagon, I put up my own wood paneling in the kitchen, I go fly fishing in the summers, and I got a weekly date night that I wouldn't miss for the world. Some time ago, I noticed my second child, I'll call him Kevin for privacy reasons, having trouble with stage fright as well. Kevin was in middle school, and they were having a class about classic American lyricism. They could choose to either do a written exam on a novel from a selected list, or do a reading of a poem. But Kevin had just overcome a nasty bout of strep throat and didn't have a lot of time. He had to settle for the poem reading. He was devastated. He had trouble eating and sleeping. Being a middle child, I think he sometimes felt a bit left out. So I wanted to go out of my way to give him a bit of extra attention on this. I promised I'd get him something to read that no one else would, and that I'd help him practice. Kevin wasn't convinced, but hopeful. That was good enough for me. I asked around, and most people I talked to claimed there were rumors of a few first editions stashed away in the old library. It had been closed off for decades, and it showed, but it hadn't been cleared out. I figured if I could find something valuable or cool for him to read, Kevin would get that extra push. Maybe some obscure work by Poe or something. I had a high school friend who worked with property management for the town, Jonah. He's basically the guy who holds the keys to those abandoned places that no one really needs anymore. The town of Tomskog, MN, has a staggering amount of buildings like that. Hell, they still had keys for the church. That thing is literally on the bottom of a lake. I called Jonah up, and he was eager to help. I don't think he gets out a lot. Jonah and I went to the Tomskog Public Library one late afternoon after work. The place had been locked and barred for years. There was a defaced sign out front that once said that it had been closed for reconstruction. Most of it had either been crossed out or filled in with obscenities. We made our way inside. I had to stop to get a handkerchief to breathe through. The mildew and moisture was so thick it stung my eyes and burned my nose. I could taste it. Jonah didn't seem to mind. Apparently it was perfectly safe as long as we didn't stay too long. Since the place was so tightly boarded up, it was dark. There was a strange discoloration on the windows, and there were patches of moss growing on the floor. There were cracks along the walls where a sort of ivy had grown and died, letting flowers bloom among its roots. A couple of daffodils and a few budding sunflowers. Strange little blue things. I don't think I've ever seen them outside of Minnesota. Jonah and I made our way to the back section. We rummaged through newspaper collections and unsorted miscellanea, looking for any kind of first editions that might have been put aside. I didn't find much. Almost got bit by a centipede, though. We'd been there for about an hour, and I could already feel my lungs close when Jonah whistled me over. He'd found something. He held up a small, leather-bound book, no larger than a DVD cover. It was untitled with a beautiful blue silk bookmark.
I heard this might be here.
He smiled.
This is an original.
An original what? I asked.
A notebook of none other than E.A. Rask.
He nodded.
Poet and novelist. Turn of the century kind of stuff.
Never heard of him.
Well, it's as unique gets.
Jonah looked out through the book, mentioning a couple of passages out loud. Nothing that could really pass for poetry, or even the beginning of a short story. Most of it was just personal notes and incomprehensible nonsense. But by the middle of the notebook, we came across a couple of lesser-known works. One in particular stood out.
The Almost Man,
Jonah said.
Listen to this.
And he recited it. I wish he hadn't, but he did. The Almost Man goes like this.
Bug-eyed bows whom well nigh died, plods of drow and dew outside, gobbles the paint, the man, the way, cry-bound gags and blood-run play, throg of squab of black-eyed daw, suckled marrow and milk-soft maw.
I read it myself a couple of times. There was something about that last line that sent shivers crawling down my spine. I didn't like it. Not one bit. Let's keep looking, I sighed. This one's just wrong. We found an early collection by Langston Hughes, which we finally settled on. It had turned a couple of heads among the faculty at least, but it wasn't the kind of home run I'd been looking for. It might be enough for Kevin to get a bit of air under his wings, but I still felt like I'd failed him. I kept the notebook just in case I found something else. Jonah didn't seem to mind. On my way home, I got stuck waiting for a train to pass. I skimmed through the notes, finding myself reading The Almost Man once again. It was such a strange piece, completely out of touch with the rest of the notes. It was beautifully written in cursive. I could tell there'd been a lot of effort to put it to words. There were a couple of pages ahead that had been ripped out, probably early drafts. Plods of dro and do outside. It was nonsense, but I sort of felt it. I didn't like that I felt it. I didn't think too much about it at first. I forgot the notebook in the glove box and sat down with Kevin that night. We went through a couple of poems by Hughes, and I taught him a bit about the Harlem Renaissance. I think that gave him a bit of a boost to not just know a piece of work, but the history of it. Made him feel a bit more connected to it. My wife was just happy to see me so engaged. I might look disinterested when I spend so many hours in solitude on my work, but it's never been a matter of excluding my family. I've just wanted to separate them from what can be mind-dulling labor. My wife understands this, but the kids were a bit harder to convince. To them, there was no such thing as working from home. I mean, I was right there. What was stopping me from watching movies with them or playing video games? That night, I had trouble sleeping. There was something about the library air and the words of that poem that just made my stomach churn. Milk soft maw, I thought. I could taste the words. I got this sickening image of malleable bones and baby teeth, and a smell settled in the back of my mind, like the memory of something vile. I couldn't stop burping, accidentally waking my wife up a couple of times. There was also this strange noise somewhere outside, like a slow grinding against the side of the house. See, my wife and I managed to afford a pretty cheap home after she inherited a significant sum of money from her late mother. A one-story house not too far from Frog Lake, right next to a jogging trail. It's actually cheaper than a small apartment in most mid-sized modern cities. Turns out, not a lot of people move to this part of the country. Just 3 summers earlier, we'd hired a couple of painters to turn the house a sort of midwinter mint green, my wife's favorite color, with white detailing. It makes it stand out, but in a good way. 3 years might sound like a lot, but paint jobs are supposed to last for longer. As my kids went to school the next day, my youngest ran back in. He wanted to show me something. I could tell it was serious. He had that tone of voice that he just can't fake. On the outside of the house, right next to our bedroom window, was this large splotch of paint missing. It looked like it had been melted off or grinded. The edges were flaked, and the paint was still peeling. After sending my kids on their way, my first thought was just anger. I was pissed. The painters had screwed me. But as I turned to make a call, that line from the poem came back to me. Gobbles the paint, the man, the way. I turned back to the wall, looking it over. Gobbles the paint? What are the odds? I spent some time looking up the author of that piece. Apparently a big theme of his was the transfer of information, and how knowledge was a living, breathing thing, that the knowledge of something makes it come alive, effectively resurrecting the dead and forgotten into memory. E.A. Rask really believed that by putting as much of himself into his work as possible, he would live forever in a very real and literal sense. But that also went for things beside himself. Things that weren't real or never had been. That by choosing the right words and conveying the exact emotions and sounds he wished, he could make things come to be. I found this lecture by a man studying Raskian philosophy, who illustrated it beautifully. I watched it over a skipped lunch.
Think of a blue giraffe. Imagine the long neck, the slightly darker blue of its spots. Imagine the shape of the little horns and the size of the hooves. Let that image sink in. Can you see it?
He argued that just by him giving us that description, we had conjured a picture, a being into our minds. Something that had never been, now was. That was the basis of Rask, the transfer of thought and information through words. Thinking back on that notebook, I got this strange, uncomfortable thought. What the hell was he trying to put into my head with that poem? What image did he want me to see? Over the next couple of days, I felt a sense of unease, like I could feel the presence of something. Once, as I was cutting leeks in the kitchen, I felt absolutely certain that something was watching me, that if I turned around and looked out the window, something would be there looking at me. I could feel it, like an invisible hand reaching for my neck. Something that gobbles the man. There were a couple of strange noises at night. A few more splotches of paint peeled from the walls. In the early morning dew, my wife and I could see tracks leading through the backyard. Some kind of animal, or possibly a person dragging their feet. It was a Friday morning when I decided to just get rid of the damn book. I couldn't sleep, so I got up before sunrise. I forced myself to the car, opened the glove box, and read through the entire journal. I needed some peace of mind as to what it was about and what it meant. I started to get a feeling. Much of the nonsense written in that journal wasn't just make-believe. It was descriptions. They weren't established words, but I could still feel what they meant. They conveyed something to me that just settled in my mind, painting this picture, an uneasy, ugly picture. My wife called out, and I snapped out of a sort of half-conscious stupor. She was standing on the porch in her bathrobe, baggy-eyed, tussle-haired, and gorgeous. I threw the book back in the glove compartment and went inside to have breakfast. We decided to make it a bit of a special morning. We let the kids sleep in. My wife had a few hours of flex work. She could postpone a bit and drive them instead of having them take the bus. We had pancakes and hash browns, watched some morning cartoons, and finished off the last orange juice. As they all went on their merry way, all thoughts about that cursed notebook vanished. As I settled down to review some schematics, I heard something. It was that grinding noise again. I figured it was the paint peeling. I opened the window and looked out, but there was nothing there though. Curiously, the sound stopped. Sitting back down, it resumed. This time, I was quicker. I looked out. Still, nothing. But as I leaned my head back in, another line got caught in my throat. Cry-bound gags and blood-run play. Play? Was this play? Folding up one of my backup schematics, I waited by the open window for the sound to resume. Once it did, I folded the paper into a plane and tossed it. It sailed through the air, making a sharp turn downward. I got up, looked out, and nothing. It was gone. I questioned myself. Maybe it had passed into a strange angle. The noise stopped, leaving me to wonder what it had been in the first place. What even was an almost man? I couldn't picture it. Except, in a way, I could. I just didn't want to. I really didn't want to. As I got back to work, there was a tap against the window. Just a single tap. Looking up and out, I could see a paper plane on the ground. Someone had thrown it back. I was flip-flopping between violent paranoia and trying my best to ignore it. It was crazy. There was nothing out there. And yet that paper plane was as real gets. Then again, it was only a plane. Then again, there was a noise. About an hour before lunch, I decided to go for a walk. I left a note by my keyboard in case my wife got back, wondering where I was. And still, I couldn't ease that feeling in the back of my mind. I decided to use my permit to carry and brought my handgun along. After all, there are other things out there than mine ghosts. I checked the side of the house from afar. Just as I feared, there was a big splotch of missing paint just underneath my window. It really was a botched job. Or maybe it wasn't. I took to the jogging trail, following it further north to the more sparsely populated section of town. There was a mild fog in the air, cold moisture drifting in from the lake. Little droplets formed on my arms. The steel of the gun felt like ice. I didn't even notice that I'd been holding it this whole time. I stopped myself from going too far. Following the trail all the way around could easily take over an hour. So I turned around after about 15 minutes. I hadn't seen a single living soul in all that time. I was making a fool of myself, and as I turned around, I stopped. There was a paper plane in the middle of the trail. I picked it up, looking around. I clutched my handgun, searching the tree line. Throg of squab, I muttered. A black-eyed daw. I looked to the side, thinking I saw something glistening. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a couple of darkened leaves playing tricks on my mind. Figuring I'd been close to putting a bullet into an innocent berry bush, I relaxed my shoulders. but only for a moment. It sounded like a pained moan, somewhere halfway between a yawn and a drawn-out grunt, a rumbling gargle. I swayed around only to be knocked flat to the ground. My eyes blacked out as all air was knocked out of my lungs. I landed flat on my back, looking up at the gray, clouded sky. Something large moved past me and into the woods behind me. I could hear saplings crackle and break. I rolled onto my stomach, aiming my handgun into the forest. I could see something moving up ahead. I spotted a pair of antlers along with two frightened eyes. It looked my way, only to immediately set off in the other direction. Something had spooked it, and with that dawning realization, something in me screamed that I wasn't alone, that if I were to turn around, there'd be something there, just like I'd felt in the kitchen, or in my study, or in the bedroom. It was there. It was real. As I spun around, handgun drawn, my world went dark with a wet whack across my temple. I must have been out for at least an hour, but to me, it was like blinking. I opened my eyes, looking into a mirror. A dusty old thing stuffed away into some old shed. I was sitting on a milk crate, barely held together by rusty nails and long-forgotten care. There were two hands on my shoulder, one with 3 massive toe-like fingers and one with 4. They had no nails. I realized something was suckling on my scalp. A massive mouth with soft, baby-like teeth, bending every which way against the skin of my head. And again, that inhuman groan. That low, droning noise. The same noise I now realized I'd been hearing, pressed against the side of my home. I looked down at my right hand. I was clearly out of it. My thoughts moved in slow motion. I was bleeding profusely. My right index finger and thumb were gone. At first, I didn't know what to think or how to process it. It had to be my imagination. It couldn't be real. But looking closer at the mirror across from me, it was as real as it gets. It was at least 8 feet tall. This massive, wet-skinned thing, like a cross between an overgrown infant and a mole rat. Its pores were large enough for me to count. I could barely see where the neck stopped, and the body began. And there in the middle of what could be considered a face were 2 round, black, button-like eyes. It met my gaze through the mirror and snorted, a move that made one of its teeth come loose. It didn't seem to care, but was eager to lap up my blood. I noticed the specks of midwinter mint green paint at the edge of its mouth. I made the laziest, slowest attempt to move. It gently pulled me back, like a puppy pulling on a rope toy. My gaze flickered back and forth. "Stop," I wheezed. "You shouldn't." It groaned again, squeezing my shoulder until something popped. I cried out, and the thing snorted again. It was funny. To it, I sounded funny. Blood run play. With every attempt to squirm my way out, it pulled me in tighter. It was getting annoyed. I tried sudden jerks, slow creeps, and everything in between. But for the better part of an hour, it just held me there. At one point, it just started to bite off hair, like a cow munching on fresh grass. Huge swaths of hair torn out and swallowed. I managed to get my shoulder loose, but before I could take a step, it pulled me back. It pulled me back so hard I fell off the milk crate, rolling back into a box of tools and a half-cracked rake. Fumbling around with my healthy hand, I felt a handle. As it reached for me again, I held on tight and swung. Turns out I'd grabbed the handle of a trowel. While still rusted, I managed to swing it hard enough to open a nasty cut along the creature's triceps. It reeled back, crushing the milk crate. It lunged at me. It came down with its full body weight, but I got out of the way just in time to see it pulverize a rotten shelf. Termite dust and old wood puffed into the air as I tumbled away on the floor, finally finding the familiar handle of my handgun. I tried to grab it with my right hand, but this massive jolt of pain shot all the way from my hand to my neck. I didn't have a trigger finger anymore. I wielded it in my left hand, swung around, and aimed down the barrel. A crooked half smile with teeth no larger than a corn kernel. An amused huff. I blinked the sweat out of my eyes, and it was gone. I just looked around, firing a couple of bullets into nothing, punching holes in the decayed wood and rusted metal. My ears rung as I made my way outside. There were no signs of my fingers. just blood and bite marks. I made my way back home. My wife had come home for lunch and left just as fast. I called for help. I didn't know how to explain it all. I just told them I'd been assaulted. The rest of the day was a circus. Panicked phone calls, worried voices, pointed questions. My wife came by to sit with me, leaving the boys with her sister. There were doctors, police officers, nurses, administrators, so many faces and names. It wasn't until the soft lull of the late hours that I managed to think. My wife was sitting to my left, holding my healthy hand. Our tears had dried. There were no sounds but the humming of machines. I tried to make sense of it, a creature that came to be from hearing a poem, by thinking about it. Then again, I'd read it a couple of times to my wife, and she hadn't seen or heard anything. I figured maybe it was the notebook itself that was the deciding factor. That somehow reading from the book made it more authentic, conveying the right cadence. I turned to her as she kissed my forehead. The lights were dim. I was to be kept overnight because of the blood loss. How'd it go with Kevin's, presentation? I asked. I know he's been worried about it.
It was the damnedest thing.
She smiled.
He found just the thing to read just before class. He was excited about it, too. It had this funny sound.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
She smiled.
From that book you found.
My heart went cold. I'd forgotten it in the glove box. She'd driven them to school.
The one you told me about.
She continued.
He really liked it.
If there was any truth to this, any truth at all, even the most minuscule kind of it, if having it read to someone could make it somehow come to be, I hyperventilated. She clutched my shoulders, pressing the emergency button over and over, calling out for help. I felt faint as I watched the room spin. My pulse was going haywire. I just had to scream. I don't want to go into detail about what happened. Not about the abductions or the maimings or the rumors. The paint peeled from walls across the neighborhood. The whispers of roaming things trampling the sunflower fields on the east end of town. I don't want to think about it. None of it. Not the ones who made it back, and not the ones who didn't. Today I wear a prosthetic. I cover my scars and bald spots with a baseball cap. I think others do too. The poem doesn't work unless you're reading it from the source. But when you do, it works. It is real, and I can't wrap my head around it. Kevin doesn't understand what happened, and I intend to keep it that way. If I can spare him the knowledge of accidentally causing this, in any way, shape, or form, I will. Jonah never experienced anything strange, and he was the one who first read it to me, so I think it's fine if you're the one doing the reading. Maybe there is something fundamentally different in the way the reader and the listener experience this transfer of thought. I don't know. I had to say something to someone. I figured this community might understand, and be careful what stories you tell.
I moved into the apartment on a Thursday afternoon with nothing but a mattress, a coffee table, and 2 duffel bags full of clothes. It was the cheapest place I could find within city limits, and the kind of building that had a permanent smell. Like someone had boiled cabbage in the hallway decades ago, and the scent just decided to live here rent-free. My new landlord, a wiry man with a lazy eye named Gary, didn't bother giving me much of a tour. He just handed me a set of tarnished brass keys and told me not to go poking around in other people's business, because the tenants here valued their privacy. I didn't think much of it at the time. The apartment itself was basic. A narrow kitchen, a cramped living room, and a long hallway that ran from the front door to the bedroom. The bedroom door was at the very end, with the hallway light flickering in that irritating horror movie way. The first night I was too tired from hauling boxes and rearranging furniture to notice much. I went to bed around midnight, left my phone on the nightstand and was out cold in minutes. At some point I woke up without knowing why. No noise, no dream. I just opened my eyes and felt instantly alert. The red glow of my alarm clock read 2:14 a.m. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the hallway, just beyond the faint light bleeding in from the kitchen, there was a man. Tall, easily over 6 feet, wearing what looked like a black coat that hung down to his knees. His face was shadowed, not because the hallway was dark, but like something about him swallowed the light. I couldn't see his features at all, just the suggestion of eyes catching the faintest glint. He didn't move. He just stood there, facing me, completely still. I blinked hard, convinced it was a trick of my half-asleep brain. But when my eyes opened again, he was still there. My heart started to race. I reached for my phone, but the moment my hand moved, my vision seemed to twitch, like a frame had been cut out of reality. Suddenly, the hallway was empty. I sat there for a long time, clutching my phone, trying to convince myself it was a dream. The next day, I shrugged it off, went to work, and didn't think about it until the second night. Again, I woke up at 2:14 a.m. Again, I saw him. Same position, same height, same utter stillness. This time, though, his head tilted slightly, like he was acknowledging me. My throat tightened and my skin crawled. I whispered hello without thinking. His head straightened instantly, like the motion had been reversed. Then nothing. I stayed awake until morning. Night 3, I locked the bedroom door before bed. I even pushed my coffee table in front of it, which felt ridiculous, but I needed the comfort of some kind of barrier. Sure enough, 2:14 a.m. came, and I woke to the sound of the hallway light flickering. I couldn't see him directly from the bed with the door closed, but something in me knew he was there. The air felt charged the way it does before a lightning strike. And then, 2 slow, deliberate knocks on the bedroom door. I froze. My phone was in my hand, but I didn't call anyone. The knocks didn't repeat. When I worked up the courage to check, the hallway was empty, the flickering light steady again. I told myself I was done. I'd sleep somewhere else, crash at a friend's place. But the 4th night, something happened that made me realize this wasn't about me seeing it. This was about him seeing me. I didn't wake up at 2:14 a.m. Instead, I woke up in the morning, feeling oddly relieved. That relief lasted until I opened my bedroom door and saw something new at the far end of the hallway. The man was gone, but on the wall, scrawled in something dark, were 3 words in shaky, uneven letters. I see you. That night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I didn't tell anyone at work about what I had seen because, honestly, how do you explain that without sounding insane? I just told them I wasn't feeling well and left it at that. When I got home, I made myself a pot of coffee and sat in the living room, positioned so I could see the hallway from where I was on the couch. My plan was simple. Stay awake until 2:14 and see what happened. Maybe it was all just in my head. Maybe I was sleepwalking or half dreaming. I even thought about setting up my phone to record, but a part of me didn't want evidence. I think I was scared of proving it was real. The building was quiet, eerily quiet, just the occasional groan of pipes and the faint hum of the fridge. I glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. My stomach was in knots. I stared into that hallway, the dim yellow glow from the single ceiling bulb casting shadows on the cracked walls. At 2:14 on the dot, there he was. I didn't see him arrive. It was like he had always been there, and my eyes just adjusted to notice him. Same height, same stillness, same faceless blackness where his head should have been. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. He didn't move, but I could feel this pressure, like a weight in the air, pressing against me. I wanted to stand, to confront him, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I just sat there frozen, staring. Then I realized something. He was closer. Not by much, maybe a foot closer than the night before. But it was enough for my brain to scream at me that this wasn't just imagination. He was getting nearer. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to blink, to move, to do something. But by the time I snapped out of it, the clock read 2:15 and the hallway was empty again. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, I seriously considered breaking my lease. But the truth was, I didn't have the money to move. This place was dirt cheap, and I was barely keeping afloat as it was. I thought about crashing at a friend's place, but that felt cowardly. Instead, I convinced myself I just needed more information. That night, I set my phone camera on a chair facing the hallway, hit record, and waited. I sat on the couch again, coffee in hand, eyes glued to the shadows. My heart pounded harder as the clock approached 2:14. When the minutes struck, he was there again, and I swear to you, he was another foot closer. I could almost make out the edges of a mouth now, like the blackness was peeling away to reveal something beneath. My phone was recording, and I thought, finally, I'll have proof. But then my phone screen went black, like it had died. I knew I'd charged it, but it was dead anyway. The man in the hall tilted his head slightly like he knew what I had tried to do. My throat was dry, my hands shaking. 2:15 came, and he was gone. This time, I grabbed my phone, still dead, and noticed it felt warm, like it had been overheated. The next morning, it powered on fine, but the recording was gone. I didn't delete it, it was just gone. Night after night, this went on, each time the man in the hall getting closer. 4 feet away, 3, 2. Every time I tried to record, the footage would vanish or the phone would die. I bought a cheap camcorder, same thing happened. Electronics just wouldn't work at 2:14 a.m. in that hallway. It was like he knew. And with every night, it was getting harder to breathe when he appeared, like the air got heavier the closer he came. By the 6th night, he was standing just a few feet from my bedroom door. I could see his hands now, long skeletal fingers that twitched slightly, like he was barely restraining himself from using them. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I would sleep in the living room that night, lock the bedroom door, and keep every light in the apartment on. But that night, 2:14 came and the lights flickered. The hallway bulb went out completely, plunging it into black. I could see the outline of him even in the dark. Impossibly tall now, like he had grown. My chest was tight, my vision narrowing. Then, footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate. For the first time, he was moving toward me while I was still awake. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like concrete. The steps stopped halfway, and I realized he was waiting for something. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. And then, just as the clock ticked to 2:15, he turned and vanished into the darkness like he'd been sucked away. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound I heard as he disappeared. My own voice whispering from the hallway, "See you tomorrow." That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I kept the lights on, the blinds drawn, and the baseball bat lying across my lap. I'd called in sick to work and spent most of the day pacing my apartment, every creak in the building making my skin tight. The thing is, I couldn't tell if I was more afraid of him actually being there or of him not showing up at all. If he was there, at least I could see him, measure the distance, gauge my timeline. If he wasn't, it meant he might have changed the rules. I sat there in the chair facing the hallway, my phone in one hand, the bat in the other, eyes locked on the open bedroom door. 1:55 a.m. rolled around and my heart rate spiked. I tried calling the landlord again. Voicemail. I thought about calling the cops, but I already knew how that would go. A man in your hallway, inside your locked apartment, who disappears before we arrive, they'd think I was crazy. 2:13 came. I held my breath. I swear, the air felt like it thickened. The light above me buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. And then, just as the minute turned to 2:14, there he was. Taller than before, or maybe it was the way he stood. His head was tilted slightly now, like he was studying. That black void where his face should be didn't make sense. It wasn't just shadows. It was absence. My eyes burned looking at it, like my brain was refusing to process what it was seeing. He was closer, not by much, maybe a foot, but I could tell. His arms hung too long, fingertips brushing the floor. I gripped the bat so hard my knuckles ached. "What do you want?" I forced the words out, my voice cracking. No answer. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, head tilted. After what felt like an hour, I blinked, and he was gone. Just gone. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but the smell in the hallway, like damp concrete and rot, was still there. I didn't sleep, couldn't. The next night I tried something different. I placed my phone at the end of the hall, recording video toward where he always appeared. I locked myself in the bedroom with the bat and sat on the bed, staring at the door. 2:14 came and went. Nothing. Not even the smell. I almost laughed, thinking maybe it was over. But then, 3:07 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open. My stomach dropped. I'd locked it. I know I'd locked it. I raised the bat, my hands shaking so bad I could barely keep it steady. And then I saw him, in my room now, by the foot of my bed. He was hunched to fit beneath the ceiling, his head tilting the opposite way now. That void where a face should be was maybe 2 feet from mine. I don't know if it was the light or my brain breaking, but I swear I saw movement inside that darkness, like something shifting just beyond the veil. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding to. The lights flickered, and in the half-second of darkness, he was gone. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, keys, and bolted out of the building. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, leaving my phone and everything else behind. When I came back the next day to grab my stuff, the landlord was waiting outside. He looked pale, shaken. He said, "I told you to keep that door locked at night." I told him I had. He just stared at me and said, "Not your door." And before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away. That night, I didn't go back. But when I checked my phone, the one I'd left in the hallway, the video file was still there. It showed nothing at 2:14, but at 3:07, the camera glitched. And for a single frame, you could see him crouched halfway down the hall, his head turned toward the lens. And the worst part? His arm was reaching out toward the phone, fingers extended, like he was about to grab it. I couldn't tell if the darkness was thicker tonight or if my eyes were simply struggling to keep up. But as soon as I blinked and my vision adjusted, I saw him. No longer a silhouette, no longer a vague shadow at the far end of the hall. The man was close, far closer than he had any right to be, without me hearing him move. He stood maybe 6 feet away, right in front of my bedroom doorway, the light from the street barely catching his features, or what should have been features. His face was an uncanny blur, like I was looking at it through a wet pane of glass. I felt my knees lock, my entire body refusing to obey the screaming in my head, telling me to shut the door, lock it, throw something heavy against it, anything to keep him from getting in. But I didn't move, and he didn't move either. It was like we were locked in some kind of invisible staring contest, though I couldn't actually see his eyes. And then I realized something. His chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. Or if he was, the rhythm was so wrong, my brain refused to recognize it as human. The seconds dragged into minutes, the minutes into something far worse. At some point, I realized my phone was still in my hand, but I didn't dare look away from him to call anyone. I thought of bolting for the window, but the idea of turning my back to him made bile rise in my throat. Then, as if he'd heard the thought in my head, he spoke. The voice was low and raspy, almost like 2 voices trying to speak at once, overlapping in a way that made my skin feel like it was being unzipped from the inside. "It's too late for that," he said. The words hit me in a way no sound ever has, like they bypassed my ears entirely and went straight into my skull. My legs buckled, and I caught myself on the doorframe, which is when I realized something even worse. He was closer, just inches from me now. I hadn't seen him move. I hadn't even blinked. I stumbled backward into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the old frame rattled. I threw my dresser in front of it, then my desk, then grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed. I stood there, shaking so hard, the bat clattered against the floorboards. No footsteps, no banging, just silence. I held that position until my calves burned and my shoulders ached, waiting for the sound of the dresser being shoved aside. It never came. Eventually, exhaustion got the better of me, and I slid down against the wall, the bat still in my hand. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up to daylight spilling through the blinds. My first thought was that it had all been some elaborate nightmare, but when I looked at the dresser, I saw it. Deep, vertical grooves carved into the wood, like something had dragged long, sharp fingers across it. I left that day, packed what I could carry, and didn't even bother telling the landlord why. I didn't care about breaking the lease or losing the deposit. I moved into a friend's spare room 2 towns over, thinking distance would be enough. For a while it was. I started sleeping again, eating again, almost convincing myself that maybe the building had just done something to my mind. But last night at exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up. I knew before my eyes opened that I wasn't alone. The air in the room was heavy, oppressive, every instinct in me screaming not to look. But I did. And there he was, standing at the foot of my bed, his head tilted unnaturally to one side, that same blurred face hovering over me. Only this time, there was no hall between us, no doorway, no escape. He leaned closer, until the cold of his breath washed over my skin, and in that doubled, impossible voice, he whispered, "Told you I'd get here."
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.
"You can't call me at work," I said. "This is highly unprofessional." "I'm sorry," he said, "but I got something special. Never seen anything like it." Angel wasn't much for hyperbole. He'd done this for years. If he said he'd never seen anything like it, and he's calling me at work about it, it must be special. "I'm listening. I got a new source. They have something amazing." "Green? Of course. That's what you pay me for. I wouldn't risk it." I nodded. I'd never had a problem working with Angel before, and he was usually great at proofing his sources. "I'm a collector, not a monster." "What do you have?" "Honestly, I don't have the slightest idea, but I'll bet my ponytail you'll love it." That, if anything, was interesting. Not the ponytail, but the offer. I've always had an interest in the macabre. I feel an amazing sense of control when people talk to me, or visit my house, not knowing what I keep in the dark collection room. It makes me feel like I'm stronger and smarter, like a fox among chickens, confidently strutting among them. It brings me the confidence I need to do my job, and it earns me the money to support my lavish lifestyle. I've been collecting for years. It started with leftovers and vestigial parts, milk teeth and tonsils, just these useless little things that were thrown away. A discarded umbilical cord was my first step up, and when I got my first parasitic twin, I was ecstatic. It was all supposed to be discarded and thrown away, but to me it turned into a wonderful collection. Over the past 15 years, I've expanded into 2 rooms, shelf after shelf of discarded organs, and enough bones to construct a complete human skeleton from dozens of people. I have 6 different human hearts, 3 brains, 8 pairs of eyes, organs who couldn't or wouldn't be donated, some from the young, some from the old, some healthy, some sick, some disfigured. I prefer the latter. They make for more interesting pieces, but they have to be green. No grave robbing, no illegal harvesting, nothing unethical. Either willing or dead, and nothing marked for donation. If someone needs that heart, I don't want it. But a pair of eyes with heterochromia from someone who peacefully passed, I have a place for those. I'd honor those. Maybe get a little rotating platform. I didn't just want to have volumes of organs, though. I wanted variety, and most of all, rarity. I worked with a few doctors and morticians over the years, but most were squeamish and uncomfortable. I could rarely get anything, not to mention anything fresh. But a few years ago, I started talking to Angel. Angel works exclusively online. I know he has a vast contact network, but he works mostly in North America, mostly the East Coast, but sometimes in the Midwest. I know he has certain illegal dealings, especially in the high-end wine trade, but he always played it straight with me. He has the proper documentation and can prove to me not only that the organ is what it is, but that the patient is either dead, unharmed, or consenting. Green. As I say it out loud, it sounds so brutal. That's not what this is about. This is about control and that delicious warmth in my chest. It feels like being Clark Kent, knowing that all that stands between you and the complete ruin of everyone around you is social convention, mercy, and a pair of glasses. I got the big S right there, my trophies. That day when Angel called me, I had no idea what to expect. So when I got an email with 20 attached images, my heart was racing. I grabbed a glass of dry white, dimmed the lights, and spun my chair around. It was an unknown patient, dead of blunt force trauma, possibly some kind of traffic accident. No one had claimed the body. No one seemed to know who they were. But this person, this anonymous nobody, had some really strange features. During the autopsy, Angel's contact reached out to see if we were interested in some lovingly named leftovers. And the pictures they showed me, well, it gave me the shivers. I had no idea what I was looking at. Wonderful. It looked like a human organ, but it was either smoke damaged or almost fermented. Less than 6 hours out of the body and almost completely black. It looked like it was wrapped in some sort of seaweed with little barbs holding it all together. I had no idea what I was looking at, and I was already salivating over it. This was going to be preserved and given a proper placing for sure. They say this is a second heart, the email read. A piggyback heart, a growth added on top of the regular heart to help combat heart disease. But I've never seen anything like it. Those are usually added surgically. This is organic. It has no name. My contact wants to study it, but they're willing to send it off once they've done preliminary scans. Not gonna lie, this will cost you. It is not damaged. Eucalyptus fresh, green as grass. I had to have it. This was a unique find, as close to mint as I could get. I wanted to know all about it, and I wanted to have this trophy. It deserved my admiration. I didn't even try to play it cool. I knew Angel wouldn't try to rip me off. I just asked him to name his price. Angel got back to me the next day. He hired a courier and assured me the package would be delivered within 36 hours. He sent me more pictures, along with a few links to the accident. Some guy in a raincoat hit by a truck and didn't look like much. Angel didn't want to say too much as to not reveal his sources, but it looked legitimate. For an entire day, I was like a kid waiting to open a Christmas present. A genuine, unique type of organ in my collection. I had a few rarities, but this was different. This could be something new. This would elevate me one step over the other collectors. Of course there are others. What's the point of a collection if you can't brag about it? When I got home, there was this nervous 20-something outside my door, tapping her foot. She just handed a cooler over and ran. No confirmation if I was the right person, no code word, no notification, nothing. Angel usually has more professional people. Getting a delivery from sketchy people makes you look sketchy in turn, you know? But I brought it in and opened it up. I prepared myself and cut the foam open. Still ice cold, with vacuum packaging. Marked with Hatchet Pharma, like most of Angel's deliveries. You can't miss it with that icy blue plastic wrapper. It's a pain to open, though. I put on my gloves and started preparing a preservative jar. I had a few jars that would work while I got something fancier for the showroom. Even though I'd done this literally hundreds of times, I was visibly nervous. My hands were shaking. When I cut the bag open and reached in to grab the organ, I immediately felt a sting on the tip of my finger. The barbs were sharp. Bringing it out into the light, I finally got a better view of it. The thing was bigger than my fist. This was not just a piggyback heart. This thing was an entire organ in and of itself. It was a dark hazelnut brown with black veins. Some sort of dark green skin flaps covering up the edges. Parts of it had these sharp barbs, some sort of keratin. I'd never seen anything like it. I could tell that it had a structure similar to a human heart, though. It had clear connections to the pulmonary artery. But with just a quick look, it looked more like a dragon fruit. It was glorious. I couldn't wait to find out more about it. I gently placed it in the preservative, trying not to prick my fingers again. I was very pleased. My finger hurt a little, though. I spent hours in my lounge chair, just looking at the thing in the dim light of my collection. A mild teal spotlight, casting a sharp contrast. Even with a temporary preservative jar, I had it on a rotating platform so I could see it from every angle. I still couldn't tell what was the right orientation. What was the front and back? It was impossible to tell. It barely looked like, well, anything. I fell asleep in that chair, waking up just past midnight. I shut the lights up and got ready for bed. I didn't even think about the ache in my fingertip. where the barb had punctured my skin. I fell in and out of sleep all night. I had a fever, and by morning I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom a dozen times, and I was sweating buckets. The sheets were sticking to my body, and I was drooling like an idiot. My feet were wet from sweat, leaving stains across the floor. I barely had the energy to stand, and my balance kept failing me. The only point where I felt truly alive was when I was getting up from the toilet and fell over. My warm cheek against the cold bathroom tiles was the greatest thing I'd felt in years. I managed to crawl into the kitchen. I called in sick for the first time in years and fell asleep leaning against the kitchen island. I kept blinking in and out of consciousness. I probably sat there for a few hours. I woke up with this big chemical-smelling puddle under me, and my robe was covered in mucus. I tried to call for help, but I was too weak to hold the phone. I just remember smearing gross across the screen. The face recognition just refused to work. I couldn't get a fingerprint either. I sat there all morning, just trying to muster the strength to move. I had bouts of panic, thinking I might not ever recover, that this would be it. I would feel my pulse hammering, and I could physically feel my heart moving. Despite my body giving up, my heart was as strong as ever. A bit too strong, it felt like. It hurt like hell. I managed to get some water from the tap, but I couldn't keep it down. I kept slipping and falling over, bruising my knees and elbows. It was a goddamn miracle that I didn't crack my head open. I woke up on the kitchen floor sometime in the afternoon. The sky was gray outside, and I could hear rain smatter against the windows. I managed to sit back up and grab some orange juice from the fridge. Just getting back up on my legs was exhausting, and I found myself wheezing for air. Sitting there, chugging a jug of orange juice, all I thought about was getting through this. My head was starting to clear, but my chest still felt weird. I hadn't even noticed my finger. My entire fingertip was just one big boil that had burst sometime during the day. I managed to stumble into the shower and dump all clothes into a pile. I was covered in cuts, bruises, and these big discolored circles on my legs. I looked about as good as I felt, but at least I was back on my legs. Shaky legs, but still. There were still smatterings against my window, but it sounded more intense. I didn't think about it at first. I was just concentrating on staying upright. I'd clean the mess in the kitchen once I felt better. This was probably just some temporary thing that needed to get out of my system. Food sickness, or some kind of bug. I didn't even think about my latest collection piece. I keep those two lives very separate. By the time I stepped out of the shower and into a fresh robe, I kept having these flashes. It was as if the lights were turning on and off. It took me a few seconds to realize it was coming from the window. Looking out, my breath stopped. Something was moving past the window, casting a long shadow across the floor. Then, something else moved. Again and again, big shadows whooshed past the window, their large shadows making the entire room blink. I took a step closer, blinking. For a while, I couldn't see them. It was as if they were there, and at the same time, they weren't. But when they were there in horrifying detail. They were the size of large dogs, these pale, winged, six-fingered beasts. Round, beady eyes, reflecting what little light slipped between the clouds. Like insects flocking to a lamp, they swarmed around my windows, fighting to get a look at me. Carefully, they tried to pull at the window frames, probing for a weakness. A way in. I just stood there, looking at them. It felt like my heart was about to cramp. One of them clung to the window, staring at me, unblinking. I couldn't comprehend it. I just closed my eyes and started hitting my head over and over, like trying to beat the image out of my skull. I groaned in frustration and felt my pulse rise. When I finally opened my eyes again, they were gone. I slowly backed away from the window, as if trying not to knock over a house of cards. As my heart snagged on something, a barbed pain shot through my lungs. At the edge of every heartbeat, they came back into view, blinking in and out of existence. One moment, all I heard was rain. The next, they were clawing themselves in. They were there, and at the same time, they weren't. I needed help, but my phone had run out of batteries. I splashed my face with cold water and stepped away to check on my collection. I had to get a closer look at this mystery organ. There was a kinship there, one sick heart to another. It was oozing out of the jar. The preservatives had turned a solid blue, and the organ had swelled. It had doubled in size, and the little barbs had turned long and soft, like tendrils. But the strangest thing was what it had done to the rest of my collection. The other jars were also swelling, some preservatives turning blue, cracking the glass, and dripping onto the floor. As my pulse rose and fell, seemingly at random, I could see flashes of the organ moving. One second it was trying to break out of the jar, the next it was just sitting there. Much like the creatures outside, it was both happening, and not at the same time. My head was flashing hot and cold, and I could feel my legs buckling. Maybe it was all just the fever. Maybe nothing was wrong. Maybe I was still on the cool bathroom floor. The warmth and cold that pulsed in my head made it hard to stay upright. The floor felt crooked, but I think it might just have been me. I hurried back into my living room. For a moment it was all quiet. Then, a torrent of sounds, faces scratching claws, and leathery wings slamming against the windows. Then, a heartbeat later, all quiet. Over and over again, it was as if another world tried to beat itself into my mind. Two realities, trying to fit into my head at once. Slamming, scratching, screeching. It could go either way. It felt like a part of me was balancing on the edge of a knife, ready to fall one direction or the other. Screech, scratch, slamming against the windows with hopeless abandon. But there was another noise, a voice. Hello. I stepped into the hallway. I could see the shadows from the window behind me come and go with my irregular heartbeats. But there was a strange metallic noise coming from the front door. I turned the corner. There was something standing in my hallway. And a moment later, it wasn't. My door was open and also broken, hanging loose from the bottom hinge. A dark, towering creature. It was there and not. Large enough that it had to tilt its head to stand upright. With his impossibly long arms and fingers, he held a simple paper bag, dripping with blood. Then, he was gone. My breathing slowed. I just stood there trying to calm down. Everything was fine. Door closed, gentle rain tapping at my windows. Then, the paper bag was held up against my face. The creature was looming over me. The winged beasts outside were going crazy. "Give him what he wants!" A muffled voice from inside the bag pleaded. "He just wants it back. Please, just give it back to him." I fell backwards, crawling desperately. My sweaty hands slipped on the hardwood floor, scratching my palms and losing traction. It took the creature no more than 2 steps to catch up to me, holding the bag out towards me. "It's not yours to keep," the bag screamed. "You got your own!" There was no doubt in my mind. Forcing myself to stand, I crashed into my collection room, knocking over jars and trophy cases, little boxes of teeth, little stands of mummified fetuses. The jar with the strange organ had cracked, leaking a blue thick fluid onto the floor. It was a mess. It was all just a big, disgusting chemical mess. I grabbed the organ, feeling the soft barbs, little tendrils tickling my arm. I stepped back to the large creature and held out the organ. It turned its bag inside out, as something soft splattered onto the floor. Something meaty and human with a ponytail. A decapitated head trying to breathe, opening and closing its mouth like a trout. I dropped the organ in the bag. The next moment, I was alone. A broken collection. Formalin and alcohol running rampant over the floor. My feet barely avoiding the broken glass. And just outside, the rain gently tapped against my window. I haven't experienced anything like it since. The floor wasn't crooked, and the door was fine. No scratches on the windows, no bloodstains, no nothing. And still, the organ is gone. I haven't been able to get back in contact with Angel. It's like a line was cut, and I haven't heard from him since. Something must have happened. I have my suspicions, but I don't think I can handle that path just yet. It still feels like I'm one bad thought away from stepping back into that dark world, like the winged creatures are still looking for a way in. I was sick for days afterwards, and I looked awful. I've since contacted a medical professional. They have found some irregularities with my pulse, and I'm waiting for x-ray results. I don't want to sound too alarmed, but the doctor brought in 3 other people to consult with. I know this story doesn't make me sound all too sympathetic. I'm no saint, and to a lot of people, I guess I come off as a bit of a creep. But if you can just put that aside for a bit and think of me as a human, then please, pray that the results are normal.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.
I've had a fear of rats for as long as I can remember. I don't know exactly what it is about them that scares me. It's not just the tail or the way they move or how they sound. It is everything, and it is nothing. To me, rats have always been synonymous with unconditional terror. It all comes from a childhood trauma. A large rat chased me up a hill, where I had to hide in a tool shed. The thing seemed rabid, and I had to sit in there for at least an hour, listening to the squeals and cries of the desperate thing that wanted to eat me. It was an unusually big rat, larger than some cats I've seen. It's called musophobia, and up until recently, it hasn't really been an issue. I mean, sure, I can get panic attacks and a flight reaction by just seeing one, but I've been able to keep them out of my life more often than not. Sure, now that I'm a parent, I won't let my 2 kids have a hamster, but I'm pretty sure the Yorkshire Terrier we have keeps them busy. My phobia became an issue not too long ago. I was driving the kids home from school. Traffic was being rerouted for maintenance, so I had to take a smaller dirt road instead of staying on Main. It wasn't far, and there was barely any traffic. The road goes by a set of fishing cabins, set up around the lake, but was extended to lead back to the main road further up ahead. Usually there's nothing but frogs there. As I drove by, a small family of 6 rats ran straight across the road. This had never happened to me before. My body spasmed, my mind blanked. I panicked and turned the car straight into a pine tree. It was such a strange feeling. I heard this loud scream and tried to cover my ears, only to realize I was the one screaming. My oldest daughter managed to call 911. My reaction was far scarier to them than the crash itself. We were fine. I was driving slowly and everyone turned out okay. Even the car was okay, after some light body work. However, my wife insisted I started going to therapy to deal with this fear once and for all. I couldn't say no, not again. There aren't many mental health professionals in the nearby area, so the list of available therapists wasn't long. I could go for 2 sessions a week if it wasn't too far away. I was looking for assisted exposure therapy. Truth be told, I was a bit on edge about the whole thing. My wife was the driving force behind this decision, so she pretty much just pointed me where to go. She chose to sign me up for a session with Dr. Jane Bogan. Dr. Jane was excited to see me. She was in her 40s and had this combed-back Elvira-looking hairdo, but without the volume. At first sight, you might mistake her for a medium or a psychic. It wasn't the best first impression, but her credentials checked out. We shook hands, her wrist rattling with jewelry and chains. She insisted I called her Jane. The office was kind of murky. Dark gray wallpaper with a matching carpet. Plenty of bookshelves with a desk set up by the corner. And of course, fancy leather lounge chairs. The kind you can straighten out to lie down in. Her office assistant, Jeremy, offered me a coffee and a donut before returning to an adjacent room. Apparently, he helped all 4 offices in the building with their scheduling, but Jane was the only one working today. Jeremy was a short, balding man with a tired look. He had some kind of accent, but I couldn't put my finger on what. European, I think. Today, he's all ours, Jane joked. Jeremy didn't laugh. Jane and I had a long talk about my phobia. I told her about the tool shed on the top of that grassy hill and the screeching sounds of the rabid rat, the desperate scratching, trying to make a dent in the front door. I told her about the car crash and how my body just seized up and refused to let me act. Jane was a very active listener, asking follow-up questions and making notes along the way. She nodded, made eye contact, and seemed very attentive. She was good, and just talking openly about my fear was refreshing. At the end of the first session, Jane explained her thoughts to me. Until next time, I'll present a treatment plan, but I can already say you are a prime candidate for overexposure therapy. Do you mean exposure therapy? I asked. No, this is different. She smiled and touched my hand. Overexposure is slightly different, but far more effective in the long run. It also doesn't require you to actually meet or touch any rats. It can be done right here in the office. Really? I've never heard of it. I'm licensed to perform it, she said, and stood up. She pointed out a diploma next to her desk. Right there, underneath a degree from Minnesota State, was a license from the Board of Behavioral Health and Therapy, BBHT. It looked official enough, and I didn't have a reason to distrust her. I agreed to discuss it with my wife. Of course, it wasn't much of a discussion. I didn't mind trying something new, and my wife was overjoyed to see me progressing. We tried looking up overexposure therapy, but it didn't give us anything. Most links were just explaining how regular exposure therapy works. I didn't like the idea of facing my fear, but with the guidance of Dr. Jane, it felt a bit easier. She was a professional after all. I called her and agreed to the treatment. She explained it would be best to set aside a full day for it. We booked the upcoming Saturday. It wouldn't be cheap, but she guaranteed a breakthrough. I'd wager my reputation on it, she laughed. The next Saturday, I kissed my wife goodbye and left to see Dr. Jane. I was nervous, but seeing my girls wave goodbye as I pulled out of the driveway calmed my heart. They were so worried about me. I had to get better. When I got to Dr. Jane's office, she was waiting for me in the parking lot. Jeremy was there as well, despite it being a Saturday. My car was the only one in the parking lot, making me wonder if Jane lived nearby and walked to work. As I got out of the car, I noticed Jeremy holding a cup of coffee and a donut. We hadn't even stepped inside yet. He didn't blink much. "Glad you could make it," Jane said. "It's going to be a long day." Jeremy handed me the coffee and donut, and we entered the office. One of the lounge chairs was set up so I could lie down. I noticed how Jeremy lingered in the room until Jane stared him down. Then she turned her attention to me. It felt like staring into a furnace. "Have a seat." I laid down as she dimmed the lights. "Close your eyes and don't be alarmed," she continued. "What are you—" I didn't have time to say anything else. Jane touched her thumb to my forehead, and my mind was set on fire. That's the only way I can explain the sensation. My mind flared, and there was an intense heat, wave after wave, fanning out from the point on my forehead she touched. Heat, then freezing cold. There was a taste of metal and a smell of burning rubber, like getting a tattoo on my brain. I couldn't open my eyes, and I couldn't feel my hands or feet. It felt like I was sinking into the chair, deeper and deeper. "Relax," a disembodied voice demanded. I felt my breath stopping, my heart slowing. Fire turned to ice. I could have sworn I was dying, but my body didn't respond. I was losing control. Then, my eyes burst open. It felt like breaching the surface after diving too deep. My pulse shot through my body like an automatic rifle. I was shaking and my eyes teared up. To call it disorienting would be an understatement. I was still in the office, but it was night. I'd arrived at 10 in the morning. Now it was close to midnight. Jane was gone. Jeremy too. My pockets were empty. I called out, but there was no response. I was alone. I opened the office door and stepped out to the parking lot, only to realize I was actually far from alone. There was Jeremy. His eyes were wide open and seemed larger than usual. The pupils were of different sizes. His mouth was open like a panting dog, revealing a tongue long enough to reach his belly button. He was completely naked and covered in deep, bloodless cuts. He stood in the middle of the parking lot, under the single working light post. He seemed taller, like stretched, soft plastic. We locked eyes. His mouth curled into a smile, never blinking, never closing his mouth. And now, he was sprinting towards me with complete abandon. Naked feet slapped against the concrete. He almost tripped as he stumbled across the curb. I slammed the door shut. Jeremy's entire body weight slammed against the door with a deep splat. The door buckled, but held. Jeremy was screaming. It was a pained, primal shriek, like someone being set on fire. All-enveloping pain, expressed in a rasping and dry voice. I hurried back into the office. One of the bookshelves looked loose, so with enough force, I'd be able to tip it. I had to try. The bookshelf itself wasn't heavy, but the over 100 books on psychology held it down. I summoned all my strength and tipped the whole thing in front of the door. I sat down, back to the bookshelf. I noticed I was screaming too, yelling at him to stop and leave me alone. It wasn't a conscious decision, it just happened. I was so disoriented. It seemed like time was standing still. As Jeremy broke through the door leading in from the parking lot, I braced myself. He flung himself against the office door, but the added weight of the bookshelf and myself was enough to keep it shut. "Stop!" I heard myself scream. "Please, just stop!" I scrambled to hold him back, cutting my thumb open on a splinter. I didn't even notice it until my hand started slipping from my blood. As I stared across the room, I could see the full moon outside the office window. Slowly, a face appeared on the other side of the glass, stepping out of the dark. A woman I'd never seen before, hairless, also with deep cuts across her skin. Eyes wide, pupils differently sized, her mouth wide open, her long tongue pressed against the glass like a dying eel. "No," I heard myself sigh. "Please, just no." She nodded as her mouth turned into a sinister smile. Using her arms and face, she started to break herself against the glass. She didn't bleed from the cuts. I didn't know what to do until the glass shattered. I bolted to the left, through the side door, to the hallway. I followed the corridor to the right as the office door broke behind me. Jeremy was through. I could hear the two of them panting as they chased me. I saw two options: get out through a window or lock myself in the bathroom. I refused to corner myself, so I chose the window. I smashed it with my elbow and climbed out, feeling cold fingers brush against my neck. It was cold outside and dark. I just ran, hearing the panting behind me. I followed a path into a pine forest, getting scratches from the trees across my face. It is nothing short of a miracle that I didn't trip. I paid no attention to my feet. As the ground turned upwards to a hill, I lost my breath. I knew this hill, and this couldn't be here. It was the same hill where I'd been chased into a tool shed as a kid. And there it was. There was nowhere else for me to go. They were faster, and I had to find cover. This was impossible. I'd done this once before, and now I was doing it again. I ran up the hill, flung the old wooden door open, and shut it behind me. The door had a side bolt, so I locked it. There were no windows, but the entire shed was flimsy at best. I cursed myself. This was just another dead end. For minutes, it was quiet. Maybe they hadn't followed me. Maybe they took a different path. I relaxed my breath, feeling blood return to my fingers and toes. Then they came. They smashed themselves against the door. They tore at the frail planks. The pained screams exploded and echoed across the hillside. I couldn't hear myself think. Desperate, I looked where to go next, but I was cornered. "It can't end like this," I panted. "It can't. It won't. Not like this." I cried. I pleaded. There were more of them now, at least 6. One of the planks on the left side broke off, and 5 arms reached for me. Pale arms with deep, bloodless cuts. The full moon reflected unblinking eyes and long, slithering tongues. Not like this. The slide bolt had lost 2 screws. It was a matter of seconds. No! I armed myself with a claw hammer as the door burst open. Jeremy was the first in, but I didn't get the chance to attack. 3 different arms grabbed me, disarmed me, and pushed me onto the floor. Cold, naked flesh pressed against me. Countless eager faces drooled with delight as teeth pierced my neck. Then I woke up. The clock showed 20 minutes past 5 in the afternoon. I was on the floor of Dr. Jane's office, curled up in a fetal position. There was a cold towel on my head, and Dr. Jane was calmly stroking my shoulder. My head was warm, and a great headache was subsiding. Jeremy was nowhere around. "There we go," she whispered. "You're fine, you're fine." I couldn't speak. I was shaking like a leaf. Jane helped me back up in the seat. "That was the end of the treatment," she smiled. "You're done." What was... I had completely forgotten why I was there in the first place. Jane reached for something. "Hold out your hands," she said. I did as she asked. A second later, a small white mouse was placed in my palms. The confused little thing just sniffed me and stood on its hind legs. I didn't react. In my mind, I was about to be eaten alive, just seconds ago. "You seem to be cured," Jane smiled. "Treatment successful. You can give him back now if you want." I wouldn't mind holding him for a bit. I really didn't. I wanted the little mouse to stay. It was a tiny comfort. A living creature I could feel meant me no harm. "Good," nodded Jane. "So, what happened?" "You were overexposed," said Jane, filling out some paperwork. "An extreme stress reaction dampens all other reactions." "I don't understand." "Say you have an oven with 4 settings," she continued. 4 being the highest setting. That's where you were with your fear of rats. Maximum power, strength 4. She handed the paper over to me. It was her bill for the day. "I changed your maximum setting to 10. Suddenly a 4 doesn't seem so bad." "But how?" She sat down across from me and locked her eyes to mine. There was something dark in there, a hint of red. "I'm very good at what I do." She took my hand and turned it over. That's when I noticed the cut along my thumb. I was allowed to keep the white mouse. I bought him a little cage, some toys, and plenty of food. When I got home that night, my wife couldn't believe her eyes. My girls named the mouse Kenny, and he was gently played with late into the night, much to our Yorkie's dismay. My wife called it a miracle, but I didn't know what to call it. My mind was still in a daze. I find myself thinking back to that day. It wasn't a dream or a vision. It was real. It had to be. Thumbs don't cut themselves on imaginary splinters. Sometimes I find myself staring into the mirror, seeing my pupils dilate into different sizes. It feels like my tongue has grown longer. Hell, my forehead seems to have a slight magnetic pull where Dr. Jane touched me. It's a very unusual kind of headache. There was also an incident just a few days ago where I cut my finger dicing potatoes. Not a drop of blood came out. I barely even felt it. I can't bring myself to go back to Dr. Jane. If there is even a slight chance she'll put me back on that hill, I won't ever talk to her or see her again. I might have had the fear of rats scared out of me, but it has been replaced by this deep, existential dread for what Dr. Jane could do to me if she wanted to. What has she done to me? And why can't I bleed?
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.